Ooh, that looks tasty. This was reported as the last speech before the battle. Oink, 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 which I believe roughly translated is, "Oh, pardon me, thou bleeding piece of earth, that I'm meek and gentle with these butchers." Now Porky's spirit, ranging for revenge, with Wilbur by his side, come hot from hell, shall in these confines with a monarch's voice cry havoc, and let slip the hogs of war, that this foul deed shall smell above the earth with carrion hogs groaning for burial. Welcome folks, The Hungry Gamer is back with another Kickstarter preview, and today we are talking about Hogs of War, designed by Paul D. Allen and James Faulkner, published by Stone Sword Games, with art by James Churchill, Niall McGonigal, Sandro Solicari, and Jin Ray. Before I begin, please make sure you turn on your Klingon subtitles, because if I make any mistakes, that is where you'll find the corrections. And additionally, please do note that everything that you see here is just a prototype and is subject to change and upgrades. Now, what Hogs of War is it is a 1 to 4 player miniatures combat game based on the PlayStation 1 game of the same name. And additionally, this game also has a bit of that kind of real-time strategy computer game vibe to it, as you're able to upgrade your bases, and then that improves your units and unlocks other units for you to deploy, and so on and so forth. Now, if you are not interested in how this game is played and just want to jump ahead to my final thoughts, then you're going to want to move to the timestamp on the screen right now. For those of us still here, let's talk as briefly as I can about how this game is played. And I will tell you, what you see here is the aftermath of the last game that I happened to play. And what's going to happen is each player will have a base set out somewhere on the board, and on the game map, it's represented by a simple hex. And then throughout the board, there'll be various different objectives placed out, which is determined by the scenario that you happen to be playing. That will also determine where all of the terrain goes as well. And as you can expect, each type of terrain has a different bonus and who can go into it. It's harder to hit somebody with rifles if you're in the trees. It's harder to hit your explosive weapons aren't as effective in the mountains, and you get the idea. And each of the scenarios will tell you what the objective for that particular game is. And this one I have set up, it was holding these objective points here. The one I played with the designers online had to do with controlling the most of these swill pumps that were around the board. In addition to that, you're going to be gaining points each round based off of these cards on the side, and these are constantly rotating secondary objective cards. Each secondary objective will have 2 different ways to score points written on there. As you can see on there, it has 2 different ways that you can score points, and these are going to be rotating, as I said, every single round, so you can't really plan far in advance on achieving those. You do know what they are, and so as you're playing, as you're deploying, as you're figuring out what you want to do, you might want to play with those in mind. The first player to reach 12 victory points will be the winner. If both players reach 12, whoever winds up with the most. The game is broken down into a couple of different phases. In the first phase, you'll learn what your objectives are, and then you will get to add on to your base. Now, I said on the game map, your base is a simple tile. However, that is representative of this. And at the beginning of the game, you'll be told how many different buildings you get and what types of buildings they are. And as you can see, the buildings are polyomino, not tetromino. I'm sure that has IP copyright issues to it, that you're going to be able to build out. And each turn, you're going to get another building, which unlocks something else. For example, this upgrades my unit cap. This gives me more swill. Swill is your resource in the game. Or this here gives me the ability to create planes and launch planes, and so on and so forth. You get the idea. And so each turn, you'll add another one to your board. Then you'll find out how much swill you get, which is based on what you have out here on the board, what you've conquered on the map, and then you lose some depending on what buildings you've built. After that, you move into the aerial combat phase. And obviously, this only applies if you have an aerial unit, which would be a biplane or a airship i.e. a blimp. And the way the flying vehicles work is each player plans out what they're doing behind a screen. And what they're doing is they're selecting how they're flying and how fast they're flying. And so they'll have to choose, am I going to be turning left or right this turn, or just going straight? You make your choice. Then you have to turn how fast you're going. And depending on how fast you're going, the faster you go, the less you can turn. The slower you go, the more you can turn. And that will also change how quickly you act each turn as well, depending on how fast it is that you're going. And the airship's cards look differently, but in effect, they are the same thing. Then once both players have finished, you go in initiative order, with the lower initiative being faster, and then you get to act, you get to fire your weapons, and I'll talk a little bit about firing weapons a little bit later on. Once that is done, you move into the ground unit phase, and this is where you get to move your troops and your tanks. And in a nutshell, your troops are going to have 2 actions each turn, which will allow them to move, and again, different terrain does different things, different units all have different abilities. And you might be moving, you might be shooting, you might be healing, you might be dropping a minefield, you might be setting up an anti-aircraft gun, you might be firing artillery, whatever it may be, you'll be doing that, and then you'll wind up moving your tanks around as well. As you can guess, tanks are harder to maneuver, but much harder to kill. And let's quickly talk about combat. So combat is a pretty quick dice rolling, and it is determined by the type of unit that you have and how far away you are. So you'll see here, this orderly, if it is either 1 or 2 hexes away, those are the dice they get. But depending on what kind of unit you are, those dice might change the closer or further you get. Now, what you'll see there on the cards are 3 different colors of dice. You have blue, red, and green. The blue represents small projectile fire, the red represents melee, and the green represents explosives. The general rule of thumb is small arms fire can't hurt vehicles, while melee attacks can't hurt anything flying, and explosives, they can hurt anything. And the way the faces on the dice work are like so. An X means you just missed. Be better. The double hit there, that's just a normal hit, and if you are facing off against a troop, 1 hit will hurt them, while a critical will immediately take them out. Now, the criticals, additionally, you have these glancing blows. The way those work is they count as half a hit. So if you are shooting at a troop and you get 2 of those, that counts as a single hit, like so. Now, the criticals are important because criticals are the only way you can harm vehicles. So what's going to happen is, if you manage to roll a critical against a vehicle, then you get to roll one of these vehicle damage dice. And so you roll that, and a hit like this means you have done a damage to a vehicle. The critical is you've also done a damage, but you also get to roll another one of these dice. And burning means the vehicle is now burning. And so at any point, if, say, you were attacking one of my tanks here, and my tank had 2 burning tokens on it, well, that would mean if I rolled 1 critical with a hit, I would not only roll my 1 die for my critical, I would get to add 2 more, 1 for each burning token. And what's going to happen is, for every damage a tank takes, it'll lose 1 of its 3 actions it has each turn. If it winds with 0 action, it's been destroyed. Now, flying units are a little bit different. They will be taking damage. And so for each actual damage they take, they have to block off 1 part of their board. So it might be their bomb bay's been destroyed. It might be they can't use that half of their throttle, or maybe they can't go slow, or maybe they can't turn left, or maybe they can't turn right. And if all of them are filled, the vehicle has been destroyed. And that's actually it. That's really all there is to it. You're going back and forth, you're attacking each other, you're trying to outmaneuver each other. Maybe you're putting out artillery, or you're putting out an anti-aircraft gun because you're responding to what your opponent has done. But you're going to be going back and forth until someone gets to 12 points. And again, I should note out that you might be playing in teams, you might be playing a free-for-all where there are 4 different factions out there going at each other. And again, there are, I believe, 5 different scenarios that you can play. So, what do I like about this game? First off, I have fond memories of the PlayStation 1 game. I actually don't remember much about it, but I remember really enjoying it, and I remember enjoying the tongue-in-cheek vibe of the game, and this certainly has it. And it's just slightly goofy. It's slightly wacky. And it's fun. It's a delightful little miniatures game. I say little, it's not really little. It's actually pretty big. I also really like the way the air combat works. And I will be honest, when I read it in the rules, I did not think I was going to enjoy it. But I do. There's something that is just delightful about having to pick what it is you're going to do and hope you're going to outthink your opponent and hope that you don't mess up and fly yourself into a mountain or something like that. And it feels like the game. It's just kind of not really reliable. Maybe pigs shouldn't fly. And now we're seeing why. And I think it is great fun, and I like how it's broken down between ground units and air units. It just works. Additionally, I like the relative simplicity of how the game is played. You have a few actions, you do the actions, and then you roll some dice. None of the units really take long at all. I also really like the variety of troops you have. You have your grunts, you have your bombardiers, you have your snipers, you have your engineers, you have your orderlies, and you have all those different things. And there's a lot of variety there, especially when you start adding in all of the different options you have to upgrade your units. Maybe you want to give them field training. Maybe you want to make them better snipers. Maybe you want to give them jetpacks or some bayonets. Or, you know what? You deserve some super TNT. Or, you know what? It's time for a grenade launcher. Or maybe a flamethrower. Or some madness gas. And as you can see, you get the idea. There are just tons of different things that you can equip onto your different units. And once they're equipped, they now have it. And so you can build up these super units of troops if you've unlocked the ability to upgrade the units. And that is great. It is so much fun. And it makes that wide variety of units you have feel even more varied. The next thing is I enjoy the little mini game of Tetrising your base, because you have to get everything in there in a way that fits, and even though you're going to get one thing each round, you have to decide what it is that you're going to do. And that is also a lot of fun, because you're deciding, do I want to focus on tanks? Do I want to send up planes? Do I want to try to build one of these blimps and get that up there? And let's talk about the blimp really quickly, because the blimp is its own little delightful mini game. Because to launch a blimp, you have to have had a nose, a middle, and a tail. As you can imagine, you have to get all those things. You get all those, and you can send it up. But see, here's the thing, though. You can keep building and put a bunch of bomb bays in the middle of your blimp, or maybe you want to put a bunch of cannons in the middle of your blimp. You can have this huge, massive thing that you send up, and that is its own little mini game that you're playing also of, gosh, how big do I want to make this thing? Because there's actually some secondary objectives that give you bonuses if you have the biggest blimp up there. And it's silly, and it's fun, and it's delightful. And I just really enjoy all of that. It's just so very clever and cute. It has all those things that you might recognize from most miniatures skirmish type games where, yes, you have objectives to hold, and you're going out and you're going to grab some resource that's going to give you a bonus. And you have the terrain that you're dealing with and trying to get around. All of that you're going to recognize if you like miniatures games, and it has it. Now, what are my quibbles about the game? And here's my big one. There's not enough ground vehicles. You have a single tank, and that's it. Now, yes, like with the air vehicles and like with the grunts, you can upgrade them, you can change them, you can make them your own, but at the end of the day, there's one tank, and that is all that you have, and that is so disappointing. Now, I've talked to the designers. Some of the early stretch goals are different kinds of tanks and rail guns. By rail, I mean, I think, on train tracks, not like a rail gun, space future stuff. They're thinking about maybe like Jeeps and all those kinds of things. But right now, there's only the tanks. And the tanks are fun, but that's it. And when you have all these different kinds of ground units, and you have even just 2 different types of air units, so maybe some other air units would be fun, but definitely maybe a hot air balloon or something could be cool. But because there is the variety and the other theaters of combat, it does make ground vehicles feel a little bit lackluster. And at the same time, I'll say, there needs to be more buildings, or the buildings need to be differently shaped, because it's actually not hard to get every single building on your base. And to me, that takes away part of the fun of this little Tetris-style puzzle, because it's really not that hard. Now, if there's more buildings, or if the buildings were different shaped, or there was rules about this building must be next to this building or can't be next to this building, then that would make that more interesting, would make those choices more meaningful. But right now, it's a fun little puzzle. It's fun to do, but there's not really any consequence. And then the only other thing that I will throw out there is for the people who are big into miniatures games. I'll say, as far as a miniatures game goes, this is on the lighter end. This is much closer to a board game than it is to a miniatures game, in the sense of something like Warhammer 40K being a miniatures game. I would say this is even lighter than a game like Omicron Protocol, which for people trying to understand my frame of reference here, I would say a game like Omicron Protocol is about as heavy as you can go and still call yourself a board game before you're calling yourself a miniatures game. This one is much closer to the miniatures game. This one is much closer to the board game vibe, which is appropriate given the lightheartedness and goofiness of the game. There you have it, folks. That is Hogs of War, the miniatures game. I really think that the designers have captured the feel of the old PlayStation game, at least in the sense of my memory of it, because I haven't played it for 20 years. But it's fun. It is actually pretty quick. It's goofy, it's light, it's silly, and you have to make meaningful choices. And I think all of that is exactly what they set out to do. So, there you have it, folks. If you have fond memories of Hogs of War, check it out. If you like miniatures games, but you wish you had something a little lighter and a little sillier, then check this one out. It really is a fun game and has the potential through stretch goals and things like that to become a very fun game. So, as always, if I made any mistakes in the very few rules that I explained, let me know in the comments with a timestamp. I'll get that into the Klingon subtitles. As always, if you found this video useful, please like, subscribe, and share. Thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.